Hey guys, tonight we step into Brazilian interior of the 1700s, where the dust is thick, the rivers shimmer with secrets, and fortunes are made and lost with single sparkle. You're standing at the edge of Minas Gerais, a land whose hills look quiet now, but back then they held something so magnetic that people crossed oceans, risked disease, and fought each other just for a handful of tiny stones. Yes, diamonds. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this place. Between malaria, collapsing mines, and Portuguese tax collectors breathing down your neck, it's less glamorous jewel rush and more sweaty endurance challenge with blisters. Still, you're here, so no backing out. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the local time in the comments. It's always fun to see who's drifting into sleep from halfway around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is around 1725, and whispers ripple through the Portuguese colony. Diamonds have been found in the dusty province of Minas Gerais. Until then, Brazil was already a gold-producing powerhouse, but diamonds? That was a different kind of sparkle, rarer, harder, and infinitely more profitable for Lisbon's hungry crown. You trudge down a dirt path as ox carts creak past, their wheels sinking into ruts. The air is hot, the kind of sticky heat that makes your shirt glue itself to your back. But the people around you don't seem to care. Their eyes are lit with a feverish glint that has nothing to do with malaria, though malaria is waiting, too. Don't worry. The first deposits appeared in riverbeds. Men would squat knee-deep in water, sifting through gravel with improvised sieves, hoping for the sudden glimmer of a translucent stone. The Portuguese authorities quickly caught wind, and suddenly what had been sleepy cattle grazing land became the empire's most closely watched playground. Imagine the chaos. Farmers abandoning fields, artisans dropping their tools, enslaved Africans marched for hundreds of miles from coastal markets. Everyone funneled into this harsh, hilly landscape because a rumor said you could pluck riches from mud. Historians still argue whether the discovery was by accident or whether enslaved workers already familiar with African alluvial mining techniques recognized the telltale sparkle first. Either way, credit went to the colonists and profit streamed straight to Europe. You shuffle along behind a group of hopeful diggers, their shovels clanging against rock. Some carry makeshift wooden pans, others just baskets. A man mutters that he heard of someone who found a stone the size of a pigeon's egg just last week. Of course, he also swears he saw a headless mule wander in the hills, so take it with a pinch of salt. But that's how rumors fuel the frenzy. Always someone richer, always a bigger stone just around the corner. The crown wasn't stupid. By 1730, Lisbon declared a royal monopoly over diamonds. That meant only the king, or more accurately, the bureaucrats who claimed to act on his behalf, could authorize extraction, distribution, and sale. Taxes soared, rules tightened, and soldiers arrived to make sure nobody pocketed extra gems. And you, walking through this tightening net, start to feel how fragile freedom is in a place where the ground itself has become the king's property. Still, before the full weight of control set in, there was a brief window of anarchy, almost a carnival of digging. Camps sprang up overnight, huts built from palm leaves, campfires smoking into the damp night air, laughter and desperation mingling. You catch the smell of roasted manioc flour, sharp and nutty, mixed with the less pleasant odor of too many unwashed bodies packed together. Dogs bark, donkeys bray, and in every conversation, the word diamante slips in like a secret prayer. One quirky tidbit. Prospectors sometimes tested suspicious stones by scratching them against glass bottles imported from Europe. If the glass scratched, congratulations, it was likely a diamond. If not, well, it was just another pebble, and you probably look like an idiot in front of your peers. And yes, broken glass littered the camps like confetti after a bad wedding. By nightfall, the hills hum with exhaustion. The moonlight catches on heaps of gravel piled beside the rivers. You sit near the embers of fire, feeling your bones ache in sympathy with those who spent the day knee-deep in water, shoulders bent. Somewhere nearby, a fiddler tries to coax a tune from a battered violin, and people gather, clapping half-heartedly. Even in the harshest conditions, Music threads its way through, reminding everyone they're still human. Not everyone views the glitter with wide-eyed wonder. A few priests warn of greed as a corrosive sin, comparing the settlers to moths burning themselves on the flame. Some indigenous groups, already pushed aside by cattle ranchers, retreat deeper into forests, watching strangers dig and destroy rivers that once sustained them. And yet, here you are, part of this restless tide, swept forward by the promise of sparkle. By the end of the decade, the discovery of diamonds in Minas Gerais isn't just a rumor, it's a tidal wave. Ships sail out of Lisbon carrying jewel crowns and ornaments made possible by the backbreaking labor here. Wealthy Europeans brag at candlelit salons, showing off Brazilian stones set in golden rings, while people who found them sleep on dirt floors under leaky roofs. History rarely hands out justice evenly, and tonight you're sitting right in the middle of that imbalance. Still, as you close your eyes for a moment, you can almost hear the riverbeds whispering. The stones are buried somewhere beneath your feet, silent, patient, waiting for someone desperate enough to scrape them free. And tomorrow, when the sun rises again, the frenzy will continue. The settlement of Arraial do Tijuco doesn't look like much at first glance. You wander in expecting cobblestone streets and sturdy houses, but what you find is closer to a patchwork quilt of desperation and ambition. The name Arraial itself means a temporary camp, and that's exactly how it feels. Huts thrown together from mud, wattle, and palm leaves, roofs sagging as though tired of holding themselves up, the ground a permanent churn of mud from boots, hooves, and sudden tropical rains. But for a place built in a rush, it buzzes with life, the hum of thousands of people orbiting around one obsession. You step aside as two men wrestle a squealing pig through the crowd. Behind them, a group of enslaved miners shuffle past, chains clinking lightly, carrying baskets of gravel to be sifted at the river's edge. Merchants shout the prices of salted fish and manioc flour, while children dart between legs chasing each other with sticks that double as toy swords. A smell of roasting meat mixes with sewage, smoke, and the dampness of a town that hasn't yet figured out drains. Welcome to Tijuco, uncomfortable, loud, but full of a peculiar energy. By the early 1730s, this one sleepy cattle post had swollen into the heart of Brazil's diamond trade. Official records claim thousands lived here, though the exact number is a blur. Historians still argue whether the population peaked at 20,000 or closer to 40,000. Either way, you're walking to one of the largest towns in the colony, built not on agriculture or industry, but on shiny stones pulled from mud. It's as if an entire society has decided to balance itself on the edge of a sieve. There's little planning here. Streets twist around like spilled noodles, houses squeeze shoulder to shoulder, and the church perches on a highest spot, its whitewashed walls trying to look dignified despite cracks forming at the corners. You can almost hear the builder saying, it'll last a few years. No one's here forever. And yet, some people are starting to settle. Taverns sprout up like mushrooms after rain, and blacksmiths hammer late into the night, making tools for miners and knives for anyone else with short temper. Quirky detail. Tijuco's first marketplace doubled as a gossip hub. People claimed you could trade a chicken for a small diamond if you knew the right seller, though more often you get a pebble wrapped in wax paper and discover you just bought bird grit. Trust was in short supply, but rumor and trade never stopped. You overhear one woman swear that she saw a diamond shaped exactly like the Virgin Mary silhouette. Of course, when pressed, she admits she sold it before anyone else could see. Convenient, isn't it? As night falls, the town transforms. Oil lamps flicker in windows, shadows stretch long, and music drifts from taverns where miners spend their meager earnings on cachaca, the sharp sugarcane liquor that burns and comforts at the same time. You duck inside one of these low-roof buildings. Rough plank tables, benches sticky with spilled drink, and walls scribbled with initials carved by men who wanted to leave a mark in case the diamonds never gave them one. A fiddler scrapes out a tune, couples sway awkwardly, and fights occasionally break out in the corner. Someone accused of pocketing more than their fair share, someone else angry over a card game. Despite the chaos, Tijuco has its moments of charm. During the day, you see women selling ribbon, imported lace, and sweets in bright colors. Children's laughter rises above the clatter of carts, and the hills beyond remain green and quiet, as if indifferent to the fever consuming the town. You find yourself thinking, the diamonds glitter, but the real heartbeat is here in the streets, in the messy blend of hope and hardship. And yet, danger hangs everywhere. The Portuguese crown, already tightening its monopoly, stations soldiers at the edge of town to watch comings and goings. They check packs for smuggled stones, shake down anyone who looks suspicious, which, let's be honest, is almost everyone. You see a man dragged off for questioning, his protest drowned out by the rattle of armor. No one meets his eyes. You learn quickly to look away. Somewhere in this muddy sprawl, officials are building larger houses, more permanent structures with tiled roofs and inner courtyards. They imagine Tijuco not as a ramshackle camp, but as the diamond capital of the New World. You pass one of these constructions, the fresh lime plaster bright against the rough huts nearby. It feels almost comical, like someone wearing silk slippers to wade through a pigsty. Still, it signals a shift. This place, however chaotic, is starting to think it might be permanent. Historians debate whether the Crown encouraged settlement here for control or simply tolerated it because they couldn't stop it. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. What's certain is that Tijuco grew faster than anyone planned, drawing not just miners but tailors, priests, bakers, and every other trade needed to sustain a small city. Diamonds may have sparked it, but human necessity built the rest. You sit now on a log at the edge of the camp, watching the lights of Tijuco flicker like fireflies across the valley. Voices rise and fall, a mixture of Portuguese, African languages, and indigenous dialects, blending into a single restless chorus. Somewhere, a dog barks, answered by another further away. The night air cools, carrying the smell of wood smoke and frying meat. For a moment, you forget the greed, the danger, the heavy boots of soldiers. You just see a town alive, messy, temporary, and oddly beautiful. And when you finally close your eyes, you realize Tijuco isn't just a stop on the way to diamonds. It is a diamond, raw and unpolished, glittering in the dirt. You wake to the sound of boots on gravel and the clink of metal keys. The sun hasn't even burned off the mist yet, and already soldiers are patrolling the paths that snake in and out of a rail due to Tijuco. The Crown's grip is everywhere now, heavy as a velvet glove hiding iron fingers. At first, the diamond rush looked like wild freedom. Anyone with a pan and stamina could try their luck. But Lisbon was never going to let that last. Diamonds weren't just shiny trinkets. They were symbols of royal prestige, wealth to dazzle Europe's courts, and currency for paying off wars. So Portugal clamped down. Hard. By decree, the entire diamond-producing zone became the demarcated district. Think of it as the world's fanciest quarantine, but instead of germs, it was greed they wanted to contain. You wander along the invisible line that marks its boundary, guarded by soldiers who stop anyone leaving or entering. Papers are checked, packs are searched, and if you happen to sneeze while carrying gravel, someone will probably dig through your handkerchief. Okay, maybe not that extreme, but pretty close. The Crown leased diamond mining to contractors, rich men who essentially rented the right to exploit the land and paid Lisbon a fat fee for the privilege. That meant ordinary miners worked under constant supervision, with inspectors breathing down their necks. You picture a man knee-deep in a river, carefully swirling gravel in a wooden pan, while another man in a tricorn hat looms over him, arms crossed, waiting to pounce on any suspicious flicker of hand movement. Relaxing workplace? Not exactly. Historians still argue whether this leasing system actually curbed smuggling or simply created new opportunities for corruption. After all, when inspectors are underpaid and miners are desperate, a wink and a handshake can go a long way. Diamonds vanish into hidden hems of dresses, hollowed-out walking sticks, even baked loaves of bread. There's one tale, half true, half folklore, of a mule whose shoes were fitted with hollow iron heels packed with contraband stones. Clever, if you can convince the animal not to clatter too suspiciously. But beneath the clever schemes, the fear was real. You pass a wooden post where notices hang, warning of brutal punishments for smuggling, confiscation of property, prison, even exile to far-off Angola. And yes, a few unlucky examples were made public, marched through the streets in shackles to remind everyone that Lisbon's I never blinked. As you watch, a group of soldiers leads two men into town, their wrists bound, faces pale. People avert their gaze, part sympathy, part survival instinct. Walking further, you enter one of the Crown's diamond houses. Low buildings where all mine stones had to be delivered, counted, and registered. Inside, clerks in stiff collars sit at wooden tables, peering through magnifying glasses as they weigh each gem on brass scales. The air is tense, punctuated by the scratch of quills on parchment. Every pebble is noted, every speck accounted for. And you can't help thinking, for a place obsessed with sparkle, it feels oddly joyless. Still, bureaucracy brings its own peculiar humor. One quirky tidbit. Inspectors occasionally recorded stones shaped like animals or objects in their ledgers with exaggerated notes, as if amused by nature's jokes. Imagine a stiff Portuguese clerk sighing, "Ah, yes. Today we have one resembling a partridge's egg, and another curiously like the bishop's nose." The diamonds may have been serious business, but people still found ways to chuckle in the margins. The monopoly also reshaped daily rhythms. Bell towers rang not just for prayer, but for shifts, reminding miners when to start, when to deliver their baskets, when to stop. You feel the weight of routine settle over the town, like invisible chains stronger than any iron. Freedom here is measured in minutes and movements. Yet even as the Crown tried to impose order, chaos slipped through the cracks. Smugglers thrived, hiding stones in clever places, bribing soldiers, or simply running fast into the hills. Stories circulate of entire shipments disappearing, of inspectors caught with pockets fuller than their reports. And here's the irony. Lisbon's paranoia about losing revenue sometimes meant diamonds piled up in warehouses, unsold, because they preferred hoarding to risking leakage. Picture a room stacked with sacks of uncut stones gathering dust while half the town stars outside. That's efficiency for you. You linger on a bridge overlooking the river, watching miners bent over in rows like tired reeds. Soldiers pace behind them, muskets gleaming in the sun. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls, its echo bouncing off the hills. The settlement is growing richer, stricter, heavier with rules. And you feel it in your bones that the sparkle drawing everyone here is both treasure and trap. By evening, you find yourself back at the tavern. Voices are hushed tonight. People talk in whispers about new regulations, higher taxes, harsher inspections. Someone jokes that soon they'll tax the air if it passes over a diamond. Laughter ripples through the crowd, but it's nervous laughter. Even jokes carry the weight of fear. As you sip a bitter drink, you realize the Crown's monopoly hasn't just changed the economy, it's changed the entire texture of life. What began as a feverish rush is now a regimented machine, churning wealth for Europe while grinding down the people here. And yet, as the candle flickers low, you can't help but glance at the dirt floor and wonder if a stone still hides beneath it, waiting for someone reckless enough to bend the rules. The morning air is thick with mist and cold smoke, and you find yourself trudging along beside men and women who look half asleep, their tools slung across shoulders, their bodies already bent forward, as if the day has beaten them before it begins. This is daily life for miners in the Diamond District. Gritty, repetitive, exhausting, and yet somehow still threaded with flickers of hope. You step into their rhythm now, following them down to the water's edge where the day's work will play out grain by grain. The scene is noisy. Wooden pans scrape against gravel. Voices call out instructions, and the splash of boots and bare feet blends with the rush of the river. Enslaved Africans make up the largest part of this workforce, forced into relentless labor, their hands raw from days of panning in cold water. Beside them, free prospectors, poor Portuguese settlers, runaway soldiers, even the occasional adventurous foreigner, mimic the same motions. Everyone, enslaved or free, bends over mud, chasing that elusive sparkle. The Crown assigns overseers to patrol the riverbanks, keeping sharp eyes on every hand movement. You see one man reach into his pan a little too eagerly, only to feel the inspector's gaze freeze him in place. Nothing gets pocketed without risk. Still, you can sense a simmering defiance. Some miners cough into closed fists, slip pebbles into their cheeks, or even swallow stones whole, later retrieving them in far less glamorous fashion. A disgusting trick, but desperate times breed desperate creativity. Quirky tidbit. A popular rumor claimed that geese were sometimes force-fed diamonds to smuggle them past guards. The idea was that the birds' digestive systems would hide the stones until safely butchered. Whether true or not, you can't help but picture a line of suspiciously well-fed geese waddling out of camp, guarded like VIPs. Historians still argue whether such animal-based smuggling ever actually happened here, or if it was just a campfire exaggeration that got out of hand. Life of the enslaved miners is brutally regimented. At dawn, they are marched from barracks, low, crowded structures smelling of sweat and damp straw, down to the work zones. Hours stretch long, broken only by the meager meals of manioc porridge or dried fish. Whips crack occasionally, not always from punishment, but from a grim kind of rhythm, like a conductor keeping pace in this orchestra of toil. You feel the weight of their silence, the way they keep their heads down, conserving energy for survival. Yet you also catch faint fragments of song, hum tunes carried from African homelands, weaving quiet resistance into the monotony. Free miners, though spared the chains, face their own hardships. They pay fees, surrender stones to the crown, and often sink deeper into debt than into diamond-rich soil. Many gamble away whatever small fortune they do make, ending back in the mud the very next day. You walk past one such man at a tavern corner, muttering that last week he held a stone as big as a dove's egg, and now can't afford supper. His friends nod sympathetically, then laugh at the absurdity. Misery loves company, and sometimes comedy is cheaper than bread. The tools are simple: shovels, pans, wooden sluices that divert river water across gravel beds. The labor, however, is anything but simple. You bend down to mimic the motion, swirling gravel in a pan, and feel your arms ache after only a minute. Imagine doing this from sunrise to sundown, with mosquitoes whining in your ears, overseers barking orders, and no guarantee of reward. You probably wouldn't last an hour, let alone a lifetime. Around midday, the miners retreat to shaded spots for a brief pause. Meals are quick, conversations whispered, always warious soldiers drifting nearby. Someone passes around a jug of cachaca, each sip a small rebellion against exhaustion. You take a swig, sharp, fiery, and somehow comforting, like swallowing a spark. Then the bell tolls, and everyone trudges back to their posts. Historians still debate whether the Crown's tight control actually increased productivity or simply drained morale. Evidence suggests many enslaved workers deliberately slowed their pace, sabotaging tools or working just efficiently enough to avoid punishment. It's a subtle resistance, invisible in the ledgers but alive in every weary gesture. You notice one miner deliberately losing pebbles back into the river, his expression blank, his defiance hidden in plain sight. By late afternoon, the riverbeds look scarred, banks collapsed into muddy gullies. Tools clatter into carts. Overseers tally baskets of gravel, and miners are marched back toward camp. The sun dips low, painting the hills in gold, a cruel reminder of the wealth pulled from mud, but never shared with those who bled for it. Evening in the barracks is quiet but tense. Fires crackle outside, smoke curling into the cooling sky. Enslaved workers huddle together, some whispering prayers, others just lying in silence. Free miners gather at taverns, trading tall tales about lucky finds, trying to convince themselves tomorrow will be different. You stand between these worlds, feeling how both are trapped, one by chains, the other by illusions. Daily life here is a cycle: toil, exhaustion, faint hope, and repetition. Diamonds may glitter, but the rhythm is mud-colored, heavy, and unrelenting. And as you drift into sleep with them, you realize that for most who came here, the sparkle was always just out of reach, slipping away like water through tired hands. You shuffle through the narrow lanes of Tijuco as midday heat settles like a damp blanket. If you've learned anything so far, it's that diamonds don't fill stomachs. And so, every miner, overseer, merchant, and stray dog survives on the daily puzzle of food and drink. The smells hit you before the stalls come into view. Salty, smoky, faintly sour, sometimes mouth-watering, sometimes stomach-turning. This is the culinary soundtrack of an 18th-century diamond settlement. Meals revolve around what's easy to store and transport. Manioc flour, ground from the cassava root, is the backbone of nearly every dish. You dip a hand into a wooden bowl, the powdery granules sticking to your fingers like sand. Mix it with a little water, and you've got farofa, gritty but filling. Mix it with beans, and it becomes at least tolerable. Alongside it sits carne de sol, sun-dried beef salted so heavily it could probably survive the apocalypse. You chew a strip, jaw working hard, and wonder if your teeth will forgive you. Salted fish also makes an appearance, carried inland from the coast on mule trains. By the time it arrives, the fish has developed a perfume that could clear a room faster than a tavern brawl. But boiled with onions and manioc, it becomes edible, not delicious, not elegant, but enough to keep the shovels moving. One quirky tidbit. Settlers sometimes use diamond pans as makeshift cooking trays. After all, a flat wooden surface works just as well for roasting manioc cakes over coals as it does for swirling gravel. Picture a miner wiping yesterday's stew off a pan before returning it to the river in the morning. Multitasking at its finest, or most questionable. When you wander through taverns, you notice drink is just as essential as food. Cachaca dominates, the sugarcane liquor cheap, fiery, and consumed with the enthusiasm of people who'd rather not think about tomorrow. A sip burns down your throat, leaving a warmth that feels both dangerous and necessary. Some add lime or honey if they can afford it, though more often it's swallowed raw. Wine, imported from Portugal, is rare and priced high enough to make you laugh. More likely to be seen in the governor's house than in a miner's mug. Bread occasionally arrives from ovens fueled by scarce firewood. Soft loaves are prized luxuries. More often, you're gnawing on tough biscuits baked to last week's. Cheese makes appearances too, goats or cows, often salty and crumbly, adding a bit of relief to the otherwise repetitive meals. You take a bite, savoring the sharpness. It's the kind of small joy that makes another day of mud slightly more bearable. Historians still argue whether the diet here caused more malnutrition or simply maintained workers at the bare minimum of strength. Scurvy occasionally flared up, evidence of vitamin shortages, though local fruits, guava, papaya, oranges, sometimes help when available. You pass a woman selling slices of bright yellow mango on a wooden board. For a coin, you get a juicy piece, sweet enough to momentarily erase the taste of salted beef. Food markets are also theaters of gossip. Women selling beans exchange news about soldier patrols. Men haggling over manioc flour swap rumors of new diamond veins. You linger near a stall where two miners argue whether a shipment of fresh pork has been stolen by smugglers or simply eaten too quickly. The truth may never matter. What matters is a conversation, the human glue binding this transient community together. Cooking smells seep into every corner of Tijuco. In the wealthier homes, kitchens prepare stews flavored with imported spices. Cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg. Luxuries meant to remind officials of Lisbon's comforts. You peek through a doorway and catch sight of a porcelain bowl painted with blue flowers, holding a stew far richer than anything in the barracks. The contrast is sharp. On one street, salted fish barely edible. On another, silken sauce is poured over tender cuts of meat. Quirks aside, food becomes ritual. Breakfast might be a hasty swallow of black coffee, bitter and strong, paired with a scrap of bread. Lunch is the main meal, often beans and manioc, shared communally under whatever shade can be found. Dinner is smaller, sometimes skipped altogether, replaced by drink and laughter, or just drink. You sit among them, dipping manioc into a communal pot of beans, listening to the scrape of spoons against clay bowls, the sound almost soothing in its regularity. At festivals, the food shifts. Roast pigs turn on spits, their fat dripping into fires, while women fry pasties. Crispy pastries filled with meat or cheese. For one night, the barracks filled with rich smells, and everyone eats until they're groaning. Tomorrow will return to salted beef and bitter coffee. But for a few hours, you taste what joy feels like when it's seasoned with celebration. By late evening, the streets smell more spilled cachaca than of food. Men stagger home singing, some collapsing in alleys, others making it back to hammocks or dirt floors. You pass one miner sprawled against the wall, clutching an empty jug like a beloved treasure. He mutters in his sleep about finding a stone bigger than a priest's nose. Maybe tomorrow, maybe never. As you curl into your own corner, stomach full of salted fish and mango sweetness, you realize food here isn't about pleasure. It's about survival, with occasional flashes of joy. And in a place built on glitter, it's the smoky, salty, messy meals that keep the engines of hope running. The lamps burn low as you drift into the busier parts of Tijuco, where the air is thick not with wood smoke, but with the chatter of trade. You follow the sound of bargaining, coins clinking, voices rising and falling like a market symphony. Diamonds may belong to Crown on paper, but here in the alleys and backrooms, another economy hums along, sly and unstoppable. Merchants keep the town alive, and contraband keeps them comfortable. Shops line the muddied streets, their fronts wide open to show bolts of imported cloth, tins of spices, and tools made from iron dragged up the coast. You lean against a post, watching as a miner, still coated in river mud, awkwardly barters for a pair of boots. The merchant's smile is a little too practiced, the price a little too steep. Everyone knows the miner is desperate. Boots don't last long in diamond mud. A deal is struck, coins change hands, and the merchant discreetly slips something under the counter. Perhaps a stone, perhaps just more manioc flour, but you sense the unspoken code here. Not all trade is official. Step a little deeper into the shadows, and you'll find hidden doors, backrooms lit with a single candle, merchants whispering over goods that should never leave Crown custody. Smuggling is as natural here as breathing. Diamonds vanish into hollowed-out walking sticks, shoe soles, or even into the stitching of a saddle. You picture a weary mule carrying its load up a mountain trail, oblivious of the fortune sewn into its pack. Quirky tidbit. Some smugglers supposedly train parrots to carry tiny stones in their beaks, flying them from one house to another. Was it efficient? Probably not. Did it sound just plausible enough to terrify inspectors? Absolutely. Historians still argue whether these tales were exaggerations meant to glorify smugglers or genuine accounts of absurd ingenuity. Either way, you can't help but imagine a brightly colored bird squawking diamonds into someone's waiting hand. Merchants themselves are a mixed bunch. Some are Portuguese immigrants chasing quick fortunes, others freed Africans carving out livelihoods, still others women running taverns that double as informal pawn shops. You pass a woman leaning in her doorway, her voice sharp as she negotiates with customer. Inside, shelves hold clay pots, woven baskets, and a suspiciously heavy chest that she guards with hawk-like vigilance. Survival here depends on knowing when to haggle, when to smile, and when to slam the door. The Crown tries to crack down, of course. Soldiers raid stalls, overturn crates, confiscate goods. But corruption greases everything. A bribe here, a favor there, and suddenly the search ends before it really begins. You see a patrol stroll past a shop, the sergeant's pockets bulging slightly more afterward, his whistle cheerful. Law and commerce are supposed to be enemies, but in Tijuco they often hold hands under the table. For miners, merchants provide more than goods, they're lifelines. Need tools? Go to the smith. Need food on credit? Visit the tavern. Need to offload a tiny stone you definitely didn't find in your assigned basket? There's always someone who will wink and weigh it. You trail behind one miner as he ducks into a candlelit room, produces something small from his mouth, and places it carefully on the table. The merchant squints, nods, and slides a pouch of coins back. Both act as though nothing unusual just happened. Outside, life goes on as normal. Historians still debate whether the contraband network weakened Lisbon's monopoly fatally or whether the Crown secretly tolerated it to keep the settlements functioning. After all, without smuggling, miners might have deserted, leaving rivers unworked. The line between legal and illegal was so blurred that many lived in the gray zone, trading survival against risk. Evenings in the commercial quarter buzz with life. Torches flicker, fiddles scrape, and voices rise over the rattle of dice and clink of mugs. Merchants count their day's earnings by lamplight, their faces a blend of satisfaction and calculation. Some stash their profits in chests hidden beneath floorboards. Others send them off with mule trains to coastal cities, where fortunes turn into land, titles, and influence. You pause at one stall where a boy sells sugarcane sticks, their sweetness cutting to the night air. Children cluster around, chewing happily while adults barter nearby. The innocence feels almost out of place in a town so obsessed with glitter. Yet even here, life insists on sweetness where it can. As you wander back toward the quieter alleys, you pass a shop, shuttered for night. Inside, Faint light still glows. Someone is counting stones, whispering plans, waiting for the right moment to slip past soldiers and send contraband down the trail to Rio. You realize Tijuco is more than a mining town. It's a marketplace, a stage where greed, ingenuity, and survival play out every day. Diamonds may sparkle, but it's the deals, both open and hidden, that truly keep the town alive. And as you lie down to rest, the sound of coins clinking in your imagination, you know that tomorrow the cycle will begin again. Goods traded, stones smuggled, whispers pass from hand to hand like contraband themselves. The first sound that greets you in the morning isn't the clash of pickaxes or the drone of merchants. It's the soft hum of voices, carried over the settlement like a low current. As you follow the sound, you find yourself drawn toward the quarters where enslaved Africans live, their huts clustered on the edge of town. Here, the story of the diamonds has another voice, one too often muffled by official records, but impossible to ignore if you listen closely. You trudge alongside men and women preparing for another day by the river. Their bodies are weary, skin hardened from water and sun, but their voices weave together, forming rhythms that ripple through the air. A song rises, not loud enough to alert patrol, but steady enough to be felt. The words are unfamiliar to your ear, fragments of languages carried across oceans, but the cadence is unmistakable, resistance wrapped in melody. Mainstream fact. Historians agree that enslaved Africans provided the bulk of labor in Brazil's diamond fields, forced to sift through mud, gravel, and water for glimmers of wealth they would never own. But beyond the statistics lies something else, a world of cultural memory that refused to be erased. Quirky tidbit. Accounts mention that some enslaved workers, when given rare moments of rest, fashioned tiny instruments from gourds or turtle shells, plucking strings to mimic songs remembered from home. You imagine a group gathered in the dim light, a homemade lute buzzing softly, while hands clap rhythms. Against the backdrop of enforced silence and fear, music became a quiet defiance. You sit in the dust, listening as a woman hums while braiding another's hair. The pattern in the braid, you realize, is more than decoration. It's a coded map, a whispered geography hidden in plain sight. Historians still argue whether these braids truly carried secret directions for escape routes, or whether later storytellers layered symbolism onto simple hairstyles. Either way, the idea of survival woven into hair strands feels both beautiful and heartbreaking. The songs themselves often blend Catholic prayers with African spiritual patterns. You hear a chant that starts with saint's name, then dips into a rhythm that feels older, earthier. In this fusion, enslaved people carved a space of themselves within imposed faith, layering their voices with meaning invisible to overseers. You picture patrol walking by, hearing only a hymn, unaware of the hidden heartbeat pulsing beneath the words. The work is backbreaking, yet the voices persist. At the river, men and women stand knee-deep in mud, baskets in hand, sluicing gravel. Overseers bark orders, but between the splashes you catch fragments of humming. It's steady, almost hypnotic, like the current itself. It keeps rhythm when muscles ache, when hope feels far away. The sound becomes a lifeline. Evenings bring another kind of music. Drums thump, faint but insistent, their beats traveling through the settlement. You follow the rhythm to a clearing where bodies move in circles, feet stamping dust into the air. Firelight flickers across faces alive with energy. These are not celebrations sanctioned by the crown. They're acts of memory, keeping alive traditions torn from ancestral soil. You sway along, realizing the dance is more than movement. It's continuity, defiance, and perhaps even healing. One overseer once wrote, with a mixture of disdain and awe, that enslaved workers could sing the whole night through, as if their fatigue were banished by song. He likely missed the point. Song didn't banish fatigue. It transformed it into something survivable. The irony, of course, is that the very music dismissed as frivolous was what carried people through each punishing day. You notice children playing at the edge of the crowd, drumming on overturned buckets, their laughter mingling with the beat. Even in captivity, new generations find ways to inherit rhythm. You can't help but smile, though you also feel the weight of how fragile their futures are in this settlement. Historians still argue whether these communal gatherings were tolerated by the crown as a release valve or constantly suppressed. Records show both crackdowns and allowances, suggesting the line shifted depending on who was in charge that year. To you, it feels like an unresolvable contradiction. Voices rising in defiance under a system that pretended to control every sound. As the night deepens, the songs slow, the drums soften, and the voices slip into lullabies. You hear one sung to a child cradled in weary arms. The melody is simple, soothing, carrying promises a mother may not be able to keep, but must sing anyway. In that moment, you understand. These voices aren't only about resistance or survival. They're about tenderness, about refusing to let cruelty erase the quiet need for comfort. When you finally lie back, eyes closing, the echoes stay with you. The minor songs, the braided codes, the drumming circles, all shimmer like the diamonds themselves, hidden beneath layers of mud and history. Tomorrow the labor will resume, the rivers will claim more hours, and the overseers will still pace the banks. But tonight, voices carry across the dark, reminding you that even in the harshest places, humanity insists on being heard. You wake with the faint smell of wood smoke clinging to your clothes and the echo of last night's rhythms still humming in your ears. The settlement stirs again, and as you wander through its narrow lanes, your attention shifts from the rough voices of miners and merchants to the quieter, yet equally powerful presence of women. They are everywhere once you start looking, woven into the fabric of daily life, shaping the town's survival in ways that seldom make it into official records. At first glance, you might think this is a man's world, all picks, baskets, and muddy boots. But pause at the edge of a tavern, and you'll see otherwise. A woman stand behind the counter, sleeves rolled, ladling out bowls of stew. Her voice cuts through the noise, keeping drunk miners in line with a mix of wit and authority. The tavern is more than a place to eat. It's an information hub, a social knot where deals are whispered and rumors circulate. And at the center of it all stands her, cook, accountant, peacekeeper, sometimes conspirator. Mainstream fact. Records show that many taverns, shops, and boarding houses in Tijuco were owned or managed by women, often widows or wives of miners who had either perished or moved on. They carved out spaces of influence in the town, where official power belonged to men. Quirky tidbit. Some of these women apparently brewed a concoction of sugarcane spirit spiced with chili peppers, advertised as both a drink and a cure for melancholy. You picture a weary miner choking on the fiery liquor, coughing till his eyes water, and then nodding solemnly as though his sadness had truly evaporated. Was it medicine, or just really effective distraction? Historians still argue whether such recipes were remedies rooted in folk wisdom or simply clever marketing by women who knew how to sell anything with enough confidence. Beyond the taverns, women manage households that look modest on the outside, but often shelter complex networks of trade and survival. You pass a narrow doorway where a mother sits spinning cotton, her daughter grinding manioc beside her. Their small home smells faintly of soap, a rarity in a place where sweat and smoke dominate. These households keep the miners clothed, fed, and tethered to something that feels like stability. You also notice women moving through the markets with baskets balanced on their heads, selling herbs, candles, or cloth scraps. Some trade in whispers more valuable than goods, acting as go-betweens in smuggling networks. You overhear a conversation at one stall, the seller's tone sweet but her eyes sharp, her hand slipping a folded note beneath a pile of onions. In a settlement where soldiers patrol and inspectors prowl, women often become the safest couriers, overlooked, underestimated, and therefore effective. Of course, not all roles are noble or comfortable. You see women whose survival depends on more precarious means, selling companionship to miners too lonely or drunk to care about consequences. Their presence draws gossip, yet also draws coin, and in a town where fortunes vanish overnight, they too claim their share of the diamond economy. Some accounts suggest that these women occasionally struck deals with merchants or officials, leveraging information gleaned from pillow talk. You can almost hear a tavern keeper muttering, "Loose lips may sink ships, but they sure stock shelves." Children tug at skirts, their laughter darting between legs, as mothers scold and soothe in equal measure. You catch the scent of stewing beans, hear the splash of laundry against wooden boards, and realize that while men chase glitter in the rivers, it's women who anchor daily existence. Without them, the settlement would collapse into chaos far faster than diamonds could be smuggled out. One evening, You witness a festival procession winding through the streets, and women again are central. Some carry candles, others sing hymns, their voices rising clear and steady. A few wear borrowed finery, shimmering dresses that hint at borrowed diamonds hidden in seams. Historians still argue whether women in these processions were passive participants or subtle power brokers, using festivals as stages to display influence and alliances. From where you stand, the answer seems obvious. Anyone who can organize half the town to sing in harmony on a muddy street clearly wields power. At night, in quieter corners, you hear stories of women who challenge the boundaries outright. One tale describes a widow who supposedly hid diamonds in the hems of baby clothes, daring soldiers to strip search an infant. Another tells of a woman accused of poisoning a rival tavern keeper with cassava beer, though whether the rival actually died or just had a dramatic stomachache is uncertain. These anecdotes blur fact and legend, but they reveal something undeniable. Women in the settlements navigated danger with cunning equal to any merchant or miner. As you drift away from the bustle, you reflect on how invisible their work often appears in grand histories. Official documents count diamonds, taxes, and soldiers, but rarely the women who brewed, mended, cooked, and schemed. Yet as you settle into the night's quiet, you realize the hum of the settlement would falter without them. Their voices, softer but steady, are the rhythm beneath the louder clamor of picks and coins. And so you sleep, hearing the faint echo of laughter spilling from a tavern, mingling with the rustle of skirts in the dust, an undercurrent of life that refuses to be overlooked. The settlement seems quieter tonight, though not in a way that suggests fatigue. Instead, there's a charged stillness, as if the air itself is waiting. You follow the glow of candles flickering in windows, the murmur of prayers rising from the chapel, and you realize you've stumbled into one of the rare moments when the entire community pauses together, religious ritual, festival, or both, depending on how much wine has already been poured. You drift into a chapel where the walls are whitewashed but cracked, candle wax pooling along the rough altar. The smell is a mix of incense and damp wood, heavy enough to cling to your clothes. A priest drones in Portuguese, his words solemn, though the congregation shifts restlessly on benches. Many miners probably don't catch every phrase, but they bow their heads anyway, crossing themselves with a mixture of faith and superstition. For some, the ritual is comfort. For others, it's habit. For nearly all, it's insurance, because working a diamond river feels dangerous enough to require divine backup. Mainstream fact: Catholicism was the official religion of colonial Brazil, enforced by crown and church alike. Every settlement had its chapel, every festival its saint's day, and attendance wasn't so much optional as expected. The rhythm of devotion kept time alongside the rhythm of labor. But listen closely, and you'll notice something else woven into the prayers. A woman hums softly, the melody leaning toward African cadence. A man fingers a charm hidden in his pocket, carved from bone, not blessed by any priest. The rituals may look uniform, but beneath the surface they're layered with other traditions, African, indigenous, folk, like undercurrents swirling in the river. Quirky tidbit: locals sometimes baptize tools, pickaxes, shovels, even baskets, sprinkling them with holy water in hopes they would yield better diamonds. You can almost see a weary miner holding up a dripping basket, muttering, "Please let this one work," while the priest tries not to roll his eyes. Historians still argue whether such practices were tolerated as harmless superstition or condemned as dangerous heresy. The festivals, though, are where faith turns into spectacle. Imagine the streets alive with music. Fiddles scraping, drums pounding, voices singing litanies that sound suspiciously like drinking songs. Lanterns sway in the night breeze, casting golden halos on mud walls. Processions wind through the alleys. Saint statues carried on wooden platforms heavy enough to make shoulders ache. Yet nobody complains. The burden feels like blessing or maybe just a good excuse to pause mining. Children run ahead of the crowd, waving sparklers of dried cane lit at the tips, their laughter cutting through the solemn chants. Women in bright shawls toss petals underfoot. Men already tipsy shout him slightly off-key, but who's keeping score? You watch as the entire settlement, divided by class, race, and fortune, temporarily merges into one surging body of light and sound. The line between sacred and secular blurs quickly. After the procession, tables appear in taverns, mugs slam down, and fiddlers switch to faster tunes. What began as devotion slides into revelry, and before long you're watching miners dance in circles, boots stomping mud into a kind of rhythm only they understand. Faith may be the excuse, but joy is the outcome. One night, you witness a midnight mass so crowded that people spill out into the street, kneeling on stones. The priests lift the chalice, candles flare, and in the silence you hear someone whisper a prayer not in Portuguese but in Kikongo, soft and steady. The mix of languages feels seamless, as if heaven accepts all tongues here. Historians still debate whether these hybrid rituals diluted Catholic faith or enriched it. From your sleepy vantage point, it seems obvious. Faith adapts, bending to the needs of those who carry it. When diamonds dictate survival, religion bends too, offering protection against forces both earthly and divine. As the night deepens, bells toll from the chapel, echoing over the hills. The sound lingers, settling into your chest like a slow heartbeat. You walk back through streets littered with petals and spilled wine, the air buzzing with leftover songs. Tonight the town has prayed, feasted, danced, and stumbled home under the same sky. When you finally lie down, the glow of candles still flickers in your imagination, merging with the memory of drum beats. Faith here is less about dogma than about survival wrapped in ceremony, a reminder that even in mud and danger, people will always find ways to carve meaning into the dark. Morning again, though you hardly notice the sunrise, the sky is already alive with motion. Hooves clatter against stone, carts creak under loads, and voices rise in shouts and curses. You've stumbled into the artery that keeps Tijuco alive, the supply trains. Without these caravans of animals, goods, and weary men, the settlement would choke on its own hunger and isolation. From the mountains, the trails snake down toward the coast, narrow paths carved into rock and mud. Watching a line of mules wind its way along the ridge, you wonder how any of them survive the journey. Each animal carries a pack almost too heavy for its frame. Sacks of manioc flour, barrels of cachaca, bundles of cloth, sometimes even crates of weapons. And, hidden in clever corners, items that inspectors aren't supposed to see. Mainstream fact. Supply trains were the lifeline of diamond settlements in the 18th century. They brought in food, tools, liquor, and news from the coast, and they carried back gold, diamonds, and taxes to crown. Without them, the town would have starved within weeks. Quirky tidbit. Some drovers claimed they could tell the mood of their mules by the way their ears twitched on mountain curves. If the left ear droops, the beast will slip, one supposedly said. Whether superstition or sharp observation, it shows just how much survival depended on listening to animals. You picture a caravan master squinting at mule ears like an oracle, adjusting pace according to invisible signs. The work is brutal. Drovers, often poor men, sometimes boys barely strong enough to lift a saddle, walk barefoot through mud and dust, guiding dozens of animals day after day. Their skin burns under the sun, their legs swell from endless walking, and at night they sleep beside their charges, curled against the cold. You see one pat his mule's neck tenderly before collapsing into sleep, man and beast both snoring under the same sky. Along the trail, inns and resting posts spring up like lifeboats. Inside, the air smells of sweat, smoke, and frying onions. Travelers cram onto benches, swapping stories of bandits, storms, or soldiers who confiscated more than their share. One night, you sit among them, sipping watered-down cachaca, while a drover claims he saw a jaguar shadowing the train for 3 nights straight. The others laugh, though uneasily, because in these forests, it could easily be true. Bandits are no joke. The mountains teem with men who'd rather ambush a caravan than work a pan. Soldiers ride along to guard shipments, but soldiers themselves are often as hungry for contraband as the bandits. You hear rumors of entire caravans vanishing, goods scattered, mules driven off into the wild. Some say the stolen diamonds end up in Rio, others that they vanish overseas, glittering in markets Lisbon would rather not admit exist. Even when the trains reach town, the chaos continues. Streets clogged with animals braying, men shouting, merchants rushing to claim their cargo. You step aside as a barrel tips, spilling salted fish onto the dirt, the smell sharp enough to make even the hungriest dog reconsider. Children dart between legs, hoping to snatch drop crumbs, while overseers bark about missing shipments. The crown watches this flow like a hawk. Every load is supposed to be counted, every diamond tallied. Inspectors with clipboards hover near, quills scratching, eyes narrow. But you notice their hands drift easily into merchants' pockets, taking coins that smooth over errors. One inspector inspects with one hand and pockets with the other, the dual choreography of bureaucracy and corruption. Still, the rhythm of supply is what holds the settlement together. One week, it brings flour and beans that keep miners upright. The next, it carries away sacks of diamonds locked in chests, escorted by armed patrols down treacherous paths. Each train is a thread, binding the mountains to the coast, the mud of Tijuco to the marble of Lisbon. Historians still argue how efficient the system really was. Some claim it bled the colony dry, others that it kept Portugal's empire glittering for decades. From where you stand, efficiency hardly matters. What matters is survival, the endless back and forth of goods and people across mountains, rivers, and dangers. At dusk, the last caravan of the day limps into town. Mules stumble, men drag their feet, but cheers rise anyway. A shipment has arrived intact, and for now, that means full bowls, stock shelves, and a temporary sense of security. You watch as the animals are led away, their hooves clopping like exhausted applause. When you finally curl into your corner, the distant sound of mule bells lingers in your ears. The settlement may dream of diamonds, but its heartbeat is carried on the backs of beasts, trudging endlessly along mountain trails. By now, you've seen Tijuco from the mud up, from miners knee-deep in rivers to merchants whispering over ledgers, from women keeping taverns alive to children drumming on buckets. But there's another layer, one less visible yet pulsing to the town like an underground current. The secret routes, the escape plans, the whispered rebellions. Not every story is written in ledgers or sermons. Some are carried in shadows. You hear fragments first, murmurs in taverns, a word dropped too casually, a name erased mid-sentence. He went north. Or she vanished. It doesn't take long to understand. For some, the settlement isn't a prison to endure, but a threshold to slip away from. Mainstream fact. Official records admit to frequent desertions. Miners abandoned claims. Enslaved Africans fled into forests. Soldiers disappear with their weapons. The Crown complained bitterly of uncontrolled dispersal, which is a bureaucratic way of saying people kept slipping through their fingers. Quirky tidbit. One rumor claims that maps of escape routes were once sung, not drawn, turned into lullabies that children carried without realizing their meanings. A rising note meant a river, a falling note a valley, a repeated line a safe house. Historians still argue if this is plausible or poetic invention, but when you hear a miner humming a strange tune under his breath, you can't help but wonder. The forests themselves become allies and enemies. You walk along a trail at dusk, the canopy closing like a vault overhead, and realize how easy it would be to vanish here. The air is alive with insects, the ground thick with roots. But for someone desperate enough, it's freedom disguised as wilderness. Some fugitives joined indigenous groups, learning to fish, hunt, and move unseen. Others formed hidden communities, Quilombos, where fragments of Africa, Brazil, and survival fuse into new worlds beyond crown control. You meet a man in a tavern who claims he once found such a place. Smoke curling from hidden huts, laughter echoing under trees, a life built from refusal. He swears he stayed a week, ate roasted fish, and danced the drums until sunrise, then returned only because fear outweighed courage. His story may be lies, but his eyes shine too brightly to dismiss outright. Smuggling overlaps with escape. Diamonds meant for Lisbon often took detours, vanishing into back roads and reappearing in Rio, Bahia, or across the ocean. You imagine a mule with false panniers, a chest with double bottom, or a priest carrying stones hidden inside hollowed-out candles. One tale insists a shipment was once disguised as communion wafers, each host pressed around a tiny gem. Absurd? Probably. But in Tijuco, absurdity often wears a mask of truth. Rebellion simmers too. The settlement doesn't see grand uprisings daily, but it does hear whispers of them. News trickles in of slave revolts on sugar plantations, of conspiracies against governors, of men who dare to say the crown's grip could be broken. In taverns, voices lower when these stories arise, but eyes brighten. A dream travels faster than soldiers. Historians still argue how much these whispers shaped later revolts in Minas Gerais, whether they were sparks or just smoke. From where you sit, surrounded by men and women leaning closer around a candle, the sparks feel very real. Yet, not every act of rebellion is grand. Sometimes it's an enslaved miner slipping one tiny diamond into his mouth. Sometimes it's a merchant underweighing his official scales by a grain. Sometimes it's a woman carrying news folded into a loaf of bread. Small acts, repeated endlessly, form a quiet rebellion of daily life. As night deepens, you wander past the edge of the settlement, where the path disappears into forest. The air is damp, heavy with unseen life. Somewhere out there lie Colombos, bandit camps, secret trails leading to freedom, or to death. You stand still listening. For a moment, the trees seem to hum, as if carrying the songs of those who fled. When you return to town, the streets are hushed, lamps guttering low. Everyone sleeps, but you can't shake the sense that half the settlement dreams of escape, while the other half profits from stopping it. Tijuco, you realize, isn't only a diamond town. It's a crossroads of hope and defiance, where every trail might carry someone away, and every whisper might grow into something larger than fear. You lie down, the forest shadows still pressing against your thoughts. Tomorrow, miners will wade into rivers again. Overseers will shout, merchants will count. But tonight, you fall asleep with one question lingering. How many will vanish before dawn, swallowed by trees and silence? Morning again, and the settlement stirs with its usual rhythm. Boots crunching on gravel, pots clanging, voices raised in quarrels over debts and claims. Yet something lingers from last night's whispers, the sense that Tijuco lives not only on what is dug in the ground, but on what drifts in the air, rumors, ideas, and faint echoes of the world beyond these hills. Mainstream fact. By the mid-18th century, even this rough frontier wasn't immune to the Enlightenment. Books arrived hidden in chests, carried by officials, priests, or merchants. Copies of Montesquieu or Locke appear beside bales of cloth and barrels of wine. The Portuguese crown tried to censor them, but words slipped through gaps tighter than any diamond chest. You watch as a young scribe unfolds a fragile volume in candlelight, his lips moving silently. A few companions lean in, eyes wide. The text speaks of rights, liberty, governance, words so alien here they strike like thunder. For men forced about daily before Lisbon's commands, these ideas are both dangerous and intoxicating. Quirky tidbit. One anecdote insists that in Tijuco a miner once carved Montesquieu's name onto a shovel handle, hiding philosophy in plain sight. Whether true or not, you see truth in the image, a tool of labor doubling as a vessel of forbidden thought. Ideas don't remain abstract here. They mingle with grievances, the crushing taxes, the royal monopoly, the endless hunger for diamonds demanded by a distant king. In taverns, debates rise not just about the price of manioc flour, but about whether a people might govern themselves. In chapels, sermons take on double meanings. Phrases about liberation of souls, sliding into talk of earthly freedom. And always the enslaved listen. Though often excluded from these elite circles of discussion, they carry their own philosophies, born from Africa, remade in Brazil, sung in rhythms and prayers. Some historians argue the Enlightenment mattered little compared to these deep-rooted cultural continuities. But in the humid air of Tijuco, both strains hum side by side, weaving something new. You walk past a shop where imported books sit on a back shelf, wrapped in cloth, disguised as account ledgers. The merchant winks. Knowledge is contraband here, traded as carefully as any diamond. But Enlightenment talk also creates unease. Crown officials report unrest when too many men gather with quills and papers. Informants slip through taverns, ears sharp. The governor fears rebellion, and perhaps rightly so. Whispers now take the shape of conspiracies, of plans scribbled on scraps of parchment. Some say seeds planted in places like Tijuco would sprout later into the inconfidential Manaira, the great conspiracy that shook Minas Gerais at the century's end. Whether the miners of today knew their part in that larger history is unclear. But standing here, watching a circle of candlelit faces bent over a page, You sense history leaning forward, listening. The town itself reflects this tension. On one street, you see rigid officials enforcing Lisbon's decrees. On another, you hear someone quietly reciting verses about liberty. The settlement is a split personality. Half the crown's fortress, half a laboratory of new thought. Quirky rumor. Some claim diamonds themselves fuel philosophy, that men staring too long at the stones began to question the value of wealth, of empire, of human chains. It sounds fanciful, but after nights of watching gems glitter in lamplight, while men argue about freedom, you're not so sure. Walking home, you notice chalk scrawled on a wall. A terra neo pertence res, the land does not belong to kings. A child has traced it. The letter's clumsy but clear. Perhaps he doesn't understand the meaning. Or perhaps he understands better than anyone. Tijuco, for all its mud and misery, isn't only a mine. It's also a school, though not one sanctioned by Lisbon. Here, every stone chipped loose, every word smuggled in, every whispered idea teaches a lesson, that the world might be otherwise. As you settle into your cot, the murmur of distant voices seeps through the night. They are not songs of escape this time, but fragments of debate, liberty, reason, rights. Words fragile as paper, yet sharp enough to cut chains. And you wonder, when the next dawn breaks, will the hills still echo only with the sound of picks and shovels? Or will something new, something more dangerous, begin to rise from the dust? The rains return, thick and sudden, hammering the rooftops of Tijuco until the whole town feels like a ship tossed at sea. Gutters overflow, alleys turn into streams, and miners curse as the rivers swell and wash away their makeshift sieves. Yet in this torrent you sense more than weather. You sense time itself shifting. Mainstream fact. By the late 18th century, diamond yields in Minas Gerais began to decline. The richest deposits had been scraped bare, and even the most patient panners found fewer stones glittering in their pans. Lisbon tightened controls, sent more inspectors, raised taxes. The harder the crown gripped, the less there was to hold. You walk past a pit where men dig ankle-deep in muck, their shoulders sagging. Once, we found 3 stones here in a day. One mutters. Now he turns up only gravel. Hope thins like the veins themselves. Merchants grumble too. Taverns that once rang with laughter now echo with unpaid debts. Imported goods, wine, fabric, spices, piled dusty on shelves. Even smugglers complain, their fortunes dwindling as contraband dwindles too. Quirky tidbit. Local lore claims that one overseer, furious at the slump, ordered miners to pray directly into the river before work. Speak your desires into the current, he said, so the water may answer. For weeks, the banks were filled with murmured prayers, like a strange litany rising from the mud. Few diamonds followed. With scarcity comes suspicion. Officials accuse miners of hiding stones. Miners accuse officials of theft. The crown fears rebellion. Merchants fear bankruptcy, and the enslaved, already press breaking, find new cracks through which to escape. You hear of a quilombo growing large in the forest, fed by fugitives slipping away in the night. Rumors say it has its own fields, its own drums, even its own guard posts. Some whisper it's more prosperous than Tijuco itself. Fear and admiration mingle in those whispers. The town changes. Chapels still ring their bells, but pews are emptier. Festivals continue, but with fewer fireworks, cheaper wine. A sense of frayed edges creeps into every street. Yet decline doesn't erase Tijuco's pulse. It transforms it. The Enlightenment murmurs you heard before grow louder in this vacuum. When prosperity fades, grievances sharpen. Why send dwindling wealth to Lisbon when children here starve? Why endure monopoly when rivers yield almost nothing? In one tavern, by the dim glow of tallow candles, you hear a man recite lines not from scripture, but from a forbidden poet. His voice trembles, but the room leans closer. The words speak of injustice, of chains, of a future beyond kings. It is both a lament for decline and a seed of something new. Quirky rumor. Some claim that in these lean years, diamonds were occasionally swallowed whole by desperate miners, not to smuggle, but to own, if only briefly. A secret possession inside the body, shining unseen. Better in my belly than in Lisbon's vault. One story says. Historians doubt it. Yet as you watch men sift endlessly through gravel, you imagine someone clutching that private spark in their gut, a last rebellion against scarcity. By now, the settlement feels haunted, not just by ghosts of those who died in pits or chains, but by the ghost of prosperity itself. Streets that once buzzed now feel brittle. And yet, in their emptiness, you also sense possibility. Decline leaves space. Space for new voices, for dangerous dreams, for history to bend. As night falls, the rain softens. You walk to the edge of town, where abandoned shafts gape like open mouths. The forest presses in, reclaiming ground. Tijuco is shrinking, yet the air is not silent. It hums with a strange expectancy, as though decline itself were a prelude. Tomorrow, men will still pan rivers, women will still pour drinks, children will still chase dogs through mud. But you know the glitter is fading. And when the glitter goes, only the raw questions remain. Who owns the land? Who holds the power? Who will write the next chapter once diamonds turn to dust? The hills of Minas no longer dazzle, as they once did. Where rivers once flashed with possibility, now they roll brown and sullen, swollen with more mud than sparkle. Tijuco breathes in shorter gasps, its heartbeat slower, but still alive, like a candle guttering, not yet gone. Mainstream fact. As the diamond boom dwindled, Lisbon's wealth thinned. The crown, dependent on Brazilian stones, watched revenues shrink. This decline weakened Portugal itself, making it ever more vulnerable to rival powers and internal unrest. In Tijuco, the sense of being squeezed for a treasure that no longer flowed left bitterness sharp as iron. You walk past an official's house where ledgers pile high. He scratches endlessly at parchment, trying to balance accounts that no longer add up. His wife peers through lace curtains at a street half as busy as it once was. The wealth that had gilded her table now vanishes one coin at a time. Merchants reinvent themselves. Some abandon shops, turn into farming or mule trading. A few head for Rio, chasing fresher markets. Others stay, stubborn, surviving on credit and hope. The tavern where you once heard raucous laughter is quieter now. Chairs empty, candles stubbed shorter. Quirky tidbit. Locals claim that in these waning years, ghosts began to walk more openly. Miners swore they saw pale figures by the pits at dusk, flickering like candlelight. The spirits of diamonds stolen too quickly, one old woman says, shaking her head. They want their stones back. Historians call it folklore, but when the wind whistles through abandoned shafts, it's hard not to shiver. The enslaved remain, though even their masters struggle to feed them. Hunger carves deeper lines in faces already worn. Some seize the moment, fleeing in confusion, swelling quilombos in the forests. Others, still trapped, mark the days with songs that weave sorrow and resilience together. Their music, once muffled under the clamor of prosperity, now rises clearer in the thin silence of decline. Meanwhile, whispers of conspiracy sharpen into names. Men who dare to imagine Minas free of Lisbon's grip. In Confidential Manaira, the great conspiracy of the 1780s, draws on the very air you've been breathing. Grievances, enlightenment texts, and the weight of a failing economy. Some of its leaders pass through towns like this, gathering courage among miners and merchants alike. You picture a room by candlelight, parchment spread, men leaning close. One recites Rousseau, another speaks of debts too crushing to bear. A third, quieter, wonders if freedom could be born here in the hills. Outside, the rain drums on roofs, drowning their voices from prying ears. Quirky rumor, a fragment of one conspirator's note supposedly ended up used as scrap to wrap tobacco into Tijuco. A farmer bought it, unwrapped it, and found a line about liberty. Did he understand? Did he laugh? No one knows. But history sometimes leaks out in such odd ways. Walking the streets now, you sense a strange duality. On one hand, decay. The cracks in walls, the empty doorways, the children thinner than before. On the other, an electricity in the air, a restless anticipation. Decline has loosened Lisbon's grip. What replaces it, chaos or freedom, remains uncertain. Night settles heavy. You pass the chapel, its paint peeling, candles burning low. Yet the hymn sung inside swells with unusual force. Voices carrying not just prayer but yearning. It feels less like resignation than a plea for transformation. Tijuco, the diamond town, is fading, but in its fading lies the seed of something larger. The shift of a colony, the tremor before revolution. You feel it as you drift asleep, the unsettled quiet before a storm not of rain, but of history itself. Dawn again, soft and gray. The rain has passed, leaving the streets damp and glistening, puddles reflecting the crooked roofs of Tijuco. The town feels both familiar and altered, as if all the days you've walked here have been building to this moment of reckoning. Mainstream fact. By the early 19th century, the diamond monopoly faltered entirely. Control shifted. Smuggling flourished openly, and Lisbon's once iron grip weakened to rust. The empire that had demanded every gem found itself fragile, shaken by Napoleonic wars, colonial unrest, and a relentless pull of independence movements. Tijuco became less a jewel of empire and more a fading memory of one. You walk along the main road, where once carts groaned under guarded chests of stones. Now only a few mules trudge by, their panniers filled with salt or cassava flour. The wealth has moved elsewhere, and Tijuco feels like a town left behind by its own legend. Quirky tidbit. Old miners say the rivers remember. They keep their best diamonds hidden deep below. One insists. They're waiting for the right hands. It is half superstition, half lament, a way of believing the hills still hold magic even as prosperity drains away. Yet amid decline, life continues. Children still splash in puddles. Women still hang laundry that smells faintly of smoke. Taverns still pour fiery cane liquor to ease the evenings. Even stripped of glory, Tijuco lives. The town becomes a place of stories. Travelers pause to gape at the remnants. The shafts now overgrown, the chapel still standing, the crooked streets worn smooth by countless boots. They listen to old men tell of days when diamonds glittered in every pan, when soldiers marched daily, when Lisbon's shadow loomed long. Some tales grow taller with each retelling. A miner claims he once saw a diamond as large as a fist. A widow swears her husband hid a stone beneath their floorboards, still there to this day. A priest insists that every gem carried away by Lisbon still sings faintly in heaven, a choir of lost treasures. Truth and legend blend until even the careful historian cannot always untangle them. And you, walking these streets for the last time, feel the weight of all those voices. Tijuco is no longer just mud and misery, no longer only greed and chains. It is a tapestry, woven of labor, longing, defiance, and fragile hope. Mainstream fact. Today, Diamantina, the modern heir to Tijuco, remains, its colonial houses whitewashed, its streets narrow and winding. The UNESCO plaque calls it heritage, but under the tourist gaze you can still sense the ghosts. The echoes of pickaxes, the murmur of forbidden debates, the hush of footsteps slipping into the forest. Quirky tidbit. Visitors say that if you walk the alleys at night, you might hear faint clinks beneath the stones, diamonds still shifting in the dark earth below. Whether imagination or geology, the sound lingers in your ears as you step away. You realize that what survives here is not only history but memory, of miners who dreamed, of women who endured, of enslaved men and women who resisted, of ideas that flickered like candle flames until they lit revolutions. The diamond rush ended. The empire that fed on it crumbled. But Tijuco remains, stubborn and spectral, a reminder that even in mud and misery, people carved out lives, stories, and sparks of freedom. You leave the settlement as the sun rises over the hills, turning the wet cobblestones to gold for just a moment. It looks like diamonds again, briefly, brilliantly, before fading back to stone. And so ends your walk through Tijuco, a place that glittered, a place that suffered, a place that dreamed.